Okay, so this is the second part of the health and population. So, in general level, so in the last video, I mentioned that the health condition is very important, not only for the individual, but also the general level of the population. But also, there were the levels of the inequality based on their socio-economic status and social status. For example, the education and income, and other on the social demographic conditions, such as their gender and their age group, and others. And I mentioned that the definition of the health equality would be very, very important, because that's not very relevant with our common sense, but that's not about the very equal levels of health condition, but these are more about the health equality. Try to avoid the possible health disparities if these are avoidable or unfair or unjust. So I highly recommend to focus on that part and emphasize that part, so that because these are very good part we can use as the very good issues of the exam or others. All right, so various social factors and approaches to the population health condition. So this is the framework. So on the macro level, so usually the social policy and the community actions and the work and the family, or those types of the macro conditions, are out of our control. But these are impacting on our individual health condition and the biological processes, which are the mental health condition, or some impacts to our health conditions. And these are generalized, and these are resulted in as the health outcome. What we say the morbidity, these are about the sickness and the disease, and the mortality as the death conditions. So these are the socio-demographic condition on the gender, age, and the social class, education, and other social factors. And these are not impacting on a very specific part or any one part of our life. For example, if they were born in very good or very rich family, they are more likely to have the better access to the medical health conditions or the access to the preventive health care services, and they would be very better condition to catch up or follow up their health condition. And if they have very better income or others, and they are more likely to have the better education, for example. So this is what we say the cumulative or accumulation of the advantages or disadvantages, because on their pre-existing levels of the disadvantages or advantages, these are not remained, or these are not placed on the one timing of our life course stages, but also these are accumulated to have the better advantages or the larger disadvantages. So this is what we say the life course approach, so age-related changes, and what we say the life course transitions, and exploring the age-related biological and psychological trajectories of the health condition. So this is what major models are. There are many models, but what we say the critical period models and the pathways and accumulation. So these levels of the theories are not very important, but seeing those framework on the levels of the accumulation, the levels of the risks are accumulated, and in their other life, the risks are getting higher and higher. Sometimes we are not saying that the risks are getting always the higher and increase the continuously, but there are the adverse life events, such as the lose of their life partner, some accidents, and based on the life events, the levels of the risks are accumulated. But after that, because of recovery, sorry. The risks can decrease more and more. So, but anyway, in general, the levels of the differences can be higher or accumulated to be higher or others. So this is some other explanation why the life course theory would be very important. So maybe you can skip this time. But only one time point. So if we just check the health condition only one time, these would have the very limited context because we cannot find those levels of the trajectories. For example, the parental, the income condition and their parental education and parental education, these are impacting across the whole life of their children. So the better income or the better social class of the parents are impacting the birth weight and other health indicators, and their education level and their income level, job occupation, and the social network. So that's why the multiple time points in the life course will be very important. So for me, so I was born in very old house because my parents married during the college student time, so they didn't have the time, they didn't have enough money. So they came to the grandparents' home in the rural area, and I was born with the aid of the midwife. But after that, after my father finished his college degree, and he was hired in a very good company, and after having the many licenses and many of the certificates, he got the better health and better job conditions and the better income, and we moved to the metropolitan area, one of the very key city, and this is apartment where I lived in the South Korea. And so my parents passed away. The pathways of my parents that impacted me a lot of many of the opportunities. So after my father got the professional job, we moved in the better neighborhood, and I could have the better social network like that. And then I could meet. So even though we were not very rich, we were not very wealthy family. Anyway, we could meet many of the professionals, like the professors or the other professional job holders, and I could know that I could see that there could be many of the pathways. So I went to the United States for my PhD degree, and I worked at the Gettysburg College as my previous job, and I came to the Arkansas State University for my next job as a professor. So my life course transitions, these were very closely related with my father's life transitions. And so the causes of child deaths. So these were mostly about the life course transitions, and these are the health condition of the childhood, because the childhood health condition will impact a lot on the adolescent or all the adulthood and their adulthood health condition. So usually diarrheal disease and the pneumonia, these were the very big issues of the disease. But based on the accumulated health conditions, if they suffer from those types of the low weight and many of the diarrheal disease or infectious disease, that will be very impactful about that. So in this part, so I would emphasize this keyword as a chain of events, which means that all the disadvantages they had in their early life stages, in the infant period time or the childhood time, that will lead to the chains of the disadvantages, for example. So these are the key of the chain of the events: the education and the control, the getting more ability to control the events with the personal, family, and educational resources. That would be a very impactful on the education and impactful definition you need to focus on. But other than that, maybe you can read over what are the possible social control relevant with the social resources. For example, the social control or the health-related social control is sometimes based on the very personal level. So, for example, for me, those kind of soda, as you know, these are not very good for my health condition, but these are my favorite. These are super favorite, and my favorite food is the noodle. The noodle is my favorite. I can eat a lot. But usually, these foods are not very healthy, and my wife tried to make more intervention. I'd say in the good meaning, the intervention tried to control me and add a social control. So because I was very thin during my military service and 10 years ago, but after that, now I have very fat body compared with the 10 years ago. So that's why my wife worry a lot about my health condition, and eating those kind of the processed food cannot be very good. Other than that, so individuals with the family members and the spouse, they are more likely to have some of the community or social ties. As compared with the unmarried individuals, and the married individuals are more likely to have the social control, and they would have the better, lower chances of the type 2 diabetes others. So the diabetes, again, some studies that they controlled their experiment that the patients, they controlled their sample within the type 2 diabetes. So those who have the social control, those who have the higher social control or not, do they have the gender differences? So it means that those who, the married men would have the benefits of having the spouse because they would have the social control. Alright, so maybe you can skip this part, and because these are two statistical one, but anyway, on the dietary and the social control, on these are very relevant with the better health condition. And the gender and sex condition, so because the sex and their gender is closely associated with the others. So the socialization process, there are the very differentiated expectation to the males and the females. So sometimes the males would have the higher stress because of the expectancy of the masculinity, but also the woman would have the higher stress because of the gender inequality within the family, or the gender inequality within the society, such as the glass ceiling, or the lower income, if though they have the same or the similar the social conditions like that. So these are the things. So anyway, the life course and the structure based on the birth and to the end of the life course is very, very important. And the gender pay gap, this is very big stress for the woman, and because usually, in general, even though they have the same levels of the conditions, the men are paid better compared with the woman. So the sex segregation, maybe you can read over those parts. And even the women have the comparative worth, and women still are less than men because of the higher burden in the domestic work and the care work, childbirth and the care duties, and the more burdens in the housework like that. So access to health care. And the woman and the homosexuals or the gender minorities, they would have the lower access to the healthcare service sometimes. So these are other norms, and these are other gender norms. So maybe you can skip this part. And the social I'm sorry, not skip this part, but I will not explain more and more because you can read over them. And the social capital, this is very interesting concept. So this is aggregated kind of the cultural or actual resources linked with the process and durable network. For example, if you have many good family members, or if you have very many good friends, that would be very beneficial, because sometimes if you have the difficulties, you may get support from your family members or your friends like that. So this is what we say, the social capital. So, and in general, having the very highly qualified and the better social capital is associated with the better health condition. So on the work situation, and there are many things. But again, these are the famous scholars saying that the formal ties and informal ties, saying that on the elements of the social capital. But we are not saying that not only on those parts of the social capital. The social life is a horizontal relationship and also the vertical relationship, not only very informal ties, but also the formal ties. So this, the strengths of weak ties, maybe you can read over that. But these are something that the trust and the social capital, these are very good for their health condition, because in most ways and in most days, the better social network means the better social resources, and some of the buffers, or sometimes the kind of the cushion on the prevented the higher stress or the difficulty and the damages. So these are some other things that why the health of the condition, the social networks are associated with the better health condition based on the data and the COVID-19 and other issues. But however, a very other issue. So we say that the higher, so I mentioned that the social capital, having the better social capital or the stronger social capital would be associated with the better health condition. However, so this I would say this very good or the strong social capital is not always very beneficial. For example, back in the Maryland, when I was the PhD student at the University of Maryland, my family lived in the high-rise apartment, and that was very famous with a very strong community and very safe area because usually the apartment is managed by the professional members. I mean the management team, and the elderly who retired. They would not want to manage their housing. So many cases the elderly or the adults they lived in this apartment several years or even more than 10 years. But the problem was the chair of the owner association. There was the informal the group of the committee members, and the issue was, and one of the interesting thing, and I would say the weird thing was the chair of association had very strong power because they lived in that building so long time, and they knew each other a lot. So usually the chair hosted a lot of the meetings, and in past ways they hosted many of the seasonal events such as the Christmas party or the New Year's Eve party or others. But the problem was, so there were also the old owners and the new owners, and they started to have the tension because the new owners found some of the suspicious use of the fund originated from the connection between the long-standing or the chair of association and the management team. So, for example, there were many of the staffs in the management team, and they found that they were actually the family members. The management director, there was dad, and the team leader, he was a son, and the new intern was the grandson, and they paid a lot. So they deserve to pay very good, but compared with the average pay, they paid a lot, and even all the family members, not this one, whole family, not the whole family, but many of the family members worked in that building, and they could earn a lot with the connection between the association or owner association, the chair of the owners association, and others. And they had a family, so the chair of the association, she had the husband outside the building, maybe they were separated. We also had a family, but they were the owners found that they were in a romantic relationship. So there was a problem because some of the very old and very long history on the residents, they said that even though these are not very appropriate, and even though there was some suspicious use of the fund, as long as they worked very hard and they worked very good, because actually he had the connection with the local electricity company, and even whenever there are the blackouts in that building, so the blackout and the electricity is very important, as you know, and it was very easier and they was very quick to recover and restore the electricity. So some parts of the owners thought that as long as they work very well, it would be very fine. But the new owners, they found that these are not very appropriate because the usage of the word and the money and the budget should be very transparent, but that was not very transparent. So that was very righteous, probably. The problem is that it was not very happy ending. So the old owners, they wanted to support this relationship, but the new owners, it was very frustrating issue because the very bad, not transparent use of the fund would be very problematic. But they were very surprised that the old owners were not very supportive on that. So the family fired, and the old owner, the chair of the association, she moved out. But the problem was there was a very big battle, or still very high levels of the tension and the confrontation within the community. So again, so they had the very strong ties, but those levels of the strong tie was not very helpful to have the very good levels of the mental health, because of the continuous and very consecutive the lawsuits and the tensions that held that decreased a lot of the well-being of those residents. So, on the very much scholar that Putnam, the community network and civic engagement and local identity, and sense of the solidarity and equity with the other community members and the trust, reciprocal help and support. These are the conditions of the good social network and the social capital. But as you know, many of these aspects were not very qualified in that condition. And you may, so when your time, maybe if you try to watch those videos, you can also find a very bad the examples of the strong social capital. So conclusion. So social capital is generally very good for their health condition in case these are very qualified, very good. But in many ways, there are not always positive effects of the social capital. Alright, so this is the wrapping up of the health issue of the population. So please try to read over this lecture slide and the textbook chapter so that you can prepare for the final exam. Alright, thank you very much, and see you in the next the topic as the last topic of this semester. Thank you very much.